This one here, dare I say, is genius. He has caught at least one pass in 8 straight games. They're not going to run the ball really well against a good run D. And they play a lot of man, so it's all about check downs to running backs and quarterbacks running. Love this one. Love it. Let's go into the divisional round matchups here at wide receiver versus corner. As always, we look at the good and we look at the bad. Now, look, there's fewer good and fewer bad because all the teams still alive in the divisional round are pretty good. And their personnel's pretty good, but I'm going to start with the good, and I will, in fact, start with A.J. Brown. Just don't know exactly how healthy or unhealthy he is. Obviously, last week, it didn't go well with A.J. Brown. I thought he would crush the Packers, and he had one grab for 10. He had 10 more yards than I did last week, but despite the Vikings not getting it done this past Monday, with Jefferson and Addison, what did they combine for like 80 damn yards? It won't be as bad here for Philly, even though Jalen Hurts is not the greatest passer, but the matchup is good, as we've outlined pretty much all year. And we've got 2 Eagles on the list here. 2 of the top 5 are Philly Birds because Darius Williams, he is the matchup that A.J. Brown will see often. He's given up a pretty healthy 0.26 fantasy points per route run. And then Devontae Smith up against Quentin Lake, son of Carnell Lake. If you remember Carnell Lake, he was awesome for Pittsburgh. Man, that went fast because I remember him as a young player in the 90s, and now here's his son. But Quentin Lake has been pretty good. He's coming on, but he gives up a pretty generous 0.27 fantasy points per route run. They have tweaked some things. They've gotten a little bit better, but over the course of the full season, that's been the deal. They have been a little bit of a perimeter funnel. Better news for A.J. Brown, of course, Mr. Boundary receiver. Devontae is inside at times. Puka Nacua. Look, all the Ram guys have tougher matchups, but Puka against Darius Slay is still the best. And we'll get into Cooper Kupp's matchup. It's Cooper versus Cooper, by the way. But Puka Nacua, not an easy matchup against Darius Slay at a Brunswick High School here in Georgia, by the way. It's in my current neck of the woods. Also, who else went there? DJ Dallas. I always love the local connections. But yeah, Darius Slay out of Brunswick, Georgia. He is still good, but he's going to have his hands full with Puka. So I do look at that as one of the more appealing matchups of the weekend. Not as appealing, though, as this next one. My guy, John Mechie. Now, I don't know if we can even grade John Mechie on whether or not, I think we're another year away before we can make a declaration about his pro career. It's definitely been a little up and down, but he also has flashed at times. But Mechie, I don't think he fumbled last week too, by the way. I don't know if they lost that first play of the game, I believe. But he'll see Christian Roland Wallace. Now, he maybe not, though, because of Jalen Watson. Their corners are a little interchangeable, but I'll be honest, I don't know much about Christian Roland Wallace, quite frankly. But I do know is that KC has, as we've outlined here this week, KC has been very giving to the slot. KC is allowing an 81.6% completion percentage to slot targets, worst in the NFL, 8.58 YPA, 24th in the NFL. And Johnny Mechie, by the way, has a 19% target share, which is pretty good since Tank Dell went down with his injury. So they'll probably have to sling it a lot. So I do love myself some Johnny Mechie in this one. Next up, I'm going to go Amon-Ra St. Brown against Noah Igbenogany. And I'm glad that this is a thing because I just like to show off how I can pronounce Igbenogany, quite frankly. I mean, look at me. Look at me go. Noah Igbenogany, though, is a former Dolphin, And, he's coming on in this new system, and he's only given up 0.19 fantasy points per route run. But I still think that overall, it's the best matchup for Detroit. They do play a good amount of man, and their outside corners including Marshawn Lattimore, have been pretty good, although not against Mike Evans last week. But I like amon-ra here. Maybe we'll get Brett Whitefield's thoughts. He is Mr. Michigan, Mr. Detroit Lions. And then last up, Devontae Smith, a.k.a. Skinny Batman. Quentin Lake is that matchup. Now let's get into the bad, and I don't want people to panic, but these are scarier matchups, like Khalil Shakir, my guy, up against often Marlon Humphrey. Now, Shakir did well in this matchup earlier in the year, but I don't think they were playing Humphrey almost exclusively inside at the time. Not that Humphrey is completely a shutdown guy, but he is good, and he's given up 0.25 fantasy points per route run. So I'm going to have to simmer down and temper expectations for Shakir. The aforementioned Marshawn Lattimore, not giving up much so far, 0.15 fantasy points per route run. So I guess some of those Mike Evans plays were not on Lattimore, but that's the matchup here based on alignment numbers for Jameson Williams. That's quite the marquee matchup. That's quite the challenge for Jameson. Not like the challenge, though, that rookie Xavier Worthy is going to be dealing with, because again, they could shadow it with Derek Stingley. Of course, they could also move him over to Hollywood Brown if Hollywood Brown is balling. But based on the alignment numbers, Worthy will see a lot of Stingley, who's one of my favorite young corners in the NFL. He was balling last week. He's awesome. Shout out to the great Darryl Stingley, his grandfather, who was paralyzed on the field way back in the 70s. And then we get to Cooper versus Cooper. And it's not looking great for Cooper Kupp up against Cooper DeJean, who has been awesome, and Cooper Kupp has not been awesome. So, I mean, in theory, it's the best matchup because the Quinyon Mitchell is awesome, and Slay on the outside are really, really good. But Cooper DeJean is coming on too. So, given him coming on and Kupp falling off, I'm going to put this as one of the worst spots here for a wideout. And then last but not least, Terry McLaurin against Terrion Arnold. He is a number one pick. He's on the injury report this week. He has been pretty good for sure. I mean, he's not a shutdown guy like, oh my God, scary, but he has been pretty darn good. Related to lower end guys, some of these ancillary guys that we don't normally bother delving into, although once in a while something jumps out, like the Najee Harris prop last week. I believe the Grinder first popped it out. It was like over 6.5 yards. Easy win. First catch, done. Over. Cash. Love those. Of course, they don't always hit because the numbers are low for a reason, but I thought it would be a pretty cool experiment to go in and look at some sneaky ones, basically. So let's cue it up here without any further ado, and I'll actually start with Noah Gray. Why? Because the Chiefs are annoying. Let's say it that way. They must use these ancillary guys. How often do you see it? It's like, oh, we're all fired up. Patty Mahomes, Kelsey, perhaps the GOAT. Definitely the GOAT, the greatest offensive tight end of all time. You got a Hall of Fame talent in Hopkins. Hollywood Brown looks great. Xavier Worthy's coming on. Everyone's excited. And what happens? Freaking Noah Gray gets it done and catches a ball for 12 at the very least on the opening drive, something like that. Now, he caught only one ball in the first matchup. For 10, but you look at the game logs, he did post 2 goose eggs, did Noah Gray. But other than that, dude caught a ball every game, and most of the time he caught more than one. He's Mr. 2 catches for whatever. There's a number of weeks where he had 4 catch. Of course, that was early in the season. Actually, no, that was like November. Maybe it was like when they rested Kelsey for a month, basically, but we just talked about it with Brett Whitefield, the great matchup for Kelsey, essentially. Well, it's also a good matchup for Noah Gray. So there's sneaky prop number one. Sneaky prop number two would be Isaiah Pacheco, over 6.5 receiving yards. I know it's weird. I know that he hasn't done crap in the passing attack. He did play in this matchup back in week 16, and we literally had negative yardage. So if the total was 0 and you took over, you lost because it was -1. Kareem Hunt had 2 grabs for 24. Why do I like this? Well, they're coming off a bye, but I don't forget about the entire offseason narrative with Isaiah Pacheco was he was working to become a better receiver, to keep his job basically and help the team and all that. Well, it's time to do something here, catch a ball for 7. So that's the angle there. They do spread the ball around. You never know, but Patty will check it down to his running backs multiple times a game. I mean, that's pretty obvious. And I'm just going to bet that he gets at least one. If he does get only one catch, it will probably be for just 6 yards. But on the chance he can crawl for another yard and hit the prop, I think it's a pretty sneaky one. This is even sneakier, though. This one here, dare I say, is genius. I don't want to curse myself. But Brian Robinson Jr. over 8.5 yards. I watched Brian Robinson practice for a week at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. He's a pretty darn comfortable receiver. I mean, he's a pretty good receiver. He's not Austin Eckler, but he's good. He caught 35 balls his last year at Alabama, which is kind of a lot, by the way. And he was a little bit more impactful in that passing attack than I thought last week, catching 4 balls for 22. And by the way, he has caught at least one pass in 8 straight games. And then he had a little bit of a 2-game lull there. I don't know what was going on there back in October. But other than that, despite the presence of receiving specialist Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson gets catches. And I can tell you, in part, one of the reasons why, even though it's a different coach, I interviewed Ron Rivera on SiriusXM last summer. He literally told me that they wanted to get Brian Robinson the ball in the passing game on early downs, A, to be less predictable, and B, to take advantage of the receiving chops that Brian Robinson has. So I love this one because they're not going to run the ball really well against a good run D. And they play a lot of man, so it's all about check downs to running backs and quarterbacks running. Love this one. Love it. Next up is Dalton Kincaid over 31.5. I mean, it's been a tough go for Kincaid. I liked him this summer. Now, he wasn't one of my top guys, but I did like his chances. I mean, I'm going to be in on a guy who flashes immense talent and has a good pedigree in a good situation. I'm going to be on that guy every year pretty much. I did mention, though, my concern about it. Joe Brady has been really good, but one of the things he's not been great at is using Dalton Kincaid, quite frankly. And he's not that great at using running backs out of the backfield, although Ty Johnson is kind of coming on as that specialist. But at the very least, Kincaid showed signs of life last week. I mean, it wasn't much. 3 for 47, that was pretty good. That was 15.7 yards per reception. And in that first matchup, by the way, actually, no, let me pull this up. Where the heck is it? Yeah. In that first matchup, he had 7 catches, 7 targets, and 5 grabs, 47. There you go. I think with Shakir, by the way, dealing with a tougher spot against Marlon Humphrey, Dalton Kincaid over 31.5 is pretty good, pretty sneaky. No one was sneakier than last week. Kurt Samuel, over 11.5 receiving yards. It kind of felt like they kept him on ice until the playoffs, quite frankly, because he was not much of a factor all year. I saw him coming on a little bit down the stretch, but 3 for 68 with the 55-yarder. He pretty much stole the big play that I saw coming for Keon Coleman. But here's something a lot of people don't realize about Curtis Samuel. His best year in Carolina, Guess who the offensive coordinator was? Joe Brady, who is now the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. So that alone, those two elements alone, the fact that Brady coached him, and that's why he went there, Samuel, by the way, because of Brady. So that fact and the fact that Curtis Samuel showed serious signs of life last week, I'm feeling good about it. I love the C.J. Stroud one as well. The rushing total, I feel really good about it. I don't think they're going to do really well running the rock. And C.J. Stroud, I went back, I looked at all the game logs. Mobile quarterbacks run on KC, like Bo Nix. Not KC. KC. The mobile quarterbacks run on them, basically. They just do. So they play more man coverage than most. So I think CJ is going to have to take off and run. And then the last one is another sneaky one. Kenneth Gainwell, over 9.5 rushing yards. Now, why Kenneth Gainwell? Well, number one, the Philly's going to run all over LA. So I think there'll be enough table scraps for Ken Gainwell to get 10 damn yards. Why? Because Nick Sirianni can't quit Kenny Gainwell. He loves Kenny Gainwell.
Thanks for watching, but don't let the betting insights end here. If you want an extra edge this football season, you can get a month of VSiN Pro right now absolutely free. That means access to our betting insights, analysis, and tools like our betting splits at zero cost to you. Click the link in the description to sign up.